Good morning, everybody. It's 13th of December, 2025. It's Saturday. It's 11:20 in the morning. And yeah, corruption just keeps running all over in the world. Seems like everything the governments do is somehow tied to corruption. Before I even start, I'm going to start on a little bit on the Russian assets, but I just wanted to mention something. I don't know so much about it, but it's, I guess the government of Bulgaria has resigned. And there was a lot of protests with packed people, thousands and thousands of people, like probably in Sofia, the capital. And I guess it's all based on corruption. Yeah, you got it. You know, there's corruption. I've been to Bulgaria and I know that there's corruption there. And I've talked to Bulgarians and, people that are there. They got schemes going. Like, for example, if you travel to Bulgaria and you have a nice car, a lot of time the police are involved with criminals that steal cars. And they will tell them where the nice cars are, and they somehow work together that way. I don't know. Steal the cars and sometimes stealing parts out of it and things like that. That's just a side note. Like I said, I don't know otherwise so much about Bulgaria. But some of these former Soviet republics, even like Romania, known Romanian people too, you hear about all that, things like that about corruption. Very unusual that Belarus seems to have gotten rid of virtually all corruption in this country. What do you call corruption? Everybody's got a different name for it. And there's more corruption in Russia than there is in Belarus, even though it's probably drastically less than it was maybe during the Soviet years and all. And hey, there's corruption in Germany. I've confronted some of that myself, even people in the government trying to steal your money and say you didn't pay something. That you had, they thought maybe you threw the receipts away from something like 2 years earlier, and then you come up with the receipts and then they're, they're trying to make you pay again. I mean, it's happened to me. In Germany, I'll tell you what, a lot of the corruption, especially after the prices went up, and after they cut off the Russian fuel. And a lot of you people out there, some of you from Germany, you can even comment on this. Your bills have gone way up and they trying to charge you even when you've already paid in all sorts of different ways. I think it's the government cheating the energy companies. I don't know. So everybody's turning around and trying to look to get some extra money out of somebody else. I'm not talking about the regular people. I'm talking about these agencies. Absolutely crazy stuff. So Europe is really fading into that. They're all becoming Ukrainized. I think I even said that in another video. And you see the Baltics and all. Then they got this Hate Russia Club, which is nothing more than Banderitism anyway, spreading to so many places, and a lot of people in the United States as well. But anyway, that's not what I was going to be talking about. I was going to start off talking about, corruption and stealing money, I guess, when it comes to the European Union trying to steal the frozen Russian assets. They came up with some sort of a notion now. It's, they voted, I guess, yesterday. And I guess every time they had to keep renewing this vote every 6 months about the keeping the frozen assets frozen. And now I guess they left it permanent so that they don't have to vote on it. So it's basically then permanently frozen. And some people are coming up with the idea, and I don't understand how, that somehow it's now much easier to get this money to Ukraine, which really isn't to Ukraine so much anyway. They steal a whole bunch of it themselves, and they call it administrative fees. Any of you that have been close to any governments and things, and you see all this stuff. So if they're supposed to be giving aid to some other government or something like that, they steal a lot of it right up front, and they have some offices. It's, and the CEO of the offices, and trust me, I've seen this already. They take a huge fee out of it, and part of that fee goes to the administrators, the director of this little group. Like say you're building an airport, and they have a airport construction firm that the government assigns, and say the airport is already built and 5 years ago it's completed, but yet they still have that office open, and they're still taking like some sort of tax money. And, the office takes quite a bit. The director gets a good chunk, and the people and secretaries and all that. And then there's a bunch of it that just keeps going to the government. It's just a mechanism where they steal the taxpayers' money. That is a government, I tell you, in the West. I think over here they don't do that. I think they sort of know intuitively a little bit more in Belarus and Russia what is right and what is wrong. And I just even told you there's still corruption in all countries. It's just to a minimum here, and I think, maybe government corruption it's punished in things over here, and much more. So, and if you are in a government position and you are caught stealing some money or doing things pretty fraudulent, you actually go to prison. It's not like the United States or something where you're made to resign, But so enough said about that. So these frozen assets now, some of these banks, this is actually a really interesting thing. And I guess particularly they mentioned France and the UK. And they have banks in those countries that also hold frozen Russian assets. So this is irrespective of Euroclear or Euroclear, which is in Brussels. And that's not Brussels European Union. I mean Brussels, the country, and its government. When everybody talks about Brussels, you don't know if they're talking about the EU government or if they're talking about the real government. And another thing you might think of is NATO. And then under NATO is SHAPE, Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe, so which is part of NATO. And my God, I don't know how you keep track. How does anybody keep track of all of that stuff? All kinds of various governments in Brussels, especially. I'd been there about 3 times, and sometimes there with the general, the commanding general. Like I said, I worked directly for the commanding general of U.S. forces in Germany. So it was I guess say the 3rd highest ranking general in the United States military at the time, under the chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, which is technically the highest ranking general. And I did some things with them too. But anyway, so some of these banks in these countries, and I guess some of them are even up to 6 billion euros that they hold, and this is the personal banks. But it's weird because these governments that includes Germany, by the way. I don't know how much German banks hold, but I don't think it's in the top 5. And maybe it's in the top 5 in the EU, but not in the top 5 in the world. I mean, I think number 5 is even the United States, private banks holding some frozen Russian assets or whatever. But these banks, I guess, they don't want to give up this money either. They say, because it's bad for their reputation. If like even governments or businesses of different governments, they have money invested in those banks. And if they give them up, the credibility of the banks is obviously gone. So, and that's one reason why Euroclear doesn't want to do it. And then there's even laws. I guess one of them is with the Luxembourg, and it's a signed treaty. It's almost like you would see treaties between governments. And I think there was like 2 governments, and I'm sure that one of them must be Brussels, and it might even be Italy. But they say that it is an agreement. It is a signed agreement that says that they will safeguard Russia's assets in those countries. So this is countrywide, irrespective of any banks. And these people, I mean, if they're not like Finland. Finland, they signed agreements, and Ukraine signed agreements, but then they renege on them. Or the United States does it every single week, practically. They sign agreements, but they never intend to keep them. Whenever it fits their purpose, and they're a powerful country, they can just go ahead and say, well, we're not going to follow that anymore. We just do what we want to do. But some of these people actually do have integrity still in Europe, which is very nice to know, because there's such a lack. It used to be something, what was it, knights in shining armor and integrity and honor. I mean, things like that. I think that there's a lot of that is pretty much gone in Europe. It's good to see that in some places it still exists. But it's really strange. It doesn't exist in the USA. It doesn't look like in any way, shape, or form. Maybe in Asia. I'm not familiar with Asia. Not even Africans. They probably have more honor than most of these Western governments here. But I know that in Russia and Belarus, they go by laws. And it's really shocking in Belarus. Even when it's detrimental to their country, they go by the law. They say, I've seen it myself. I've seen some. Anyway, I don't want to go into that. I always have so many war stories, So Like I said, some have even up to 6 billion euros, and they refuse to hand it over to the European Commission, which says they're going to give it to Ukraine, but, obviously it's split. These are a bunch of pirates, Ursula von der Pirate, I think some people have said, pirates of the European Commission. Yeah. And some call him, like Donald Trump now. I think he's one of the pirates of the Caribbean now with all of the killings and stuff he's doing there. But yeah. So, but you would think they should plunder their own banks before they try to plunder, of the Russian assets, before they try to plunder Brussels. They're making Brussels like the Lehman Brothers. Remember how they destroyed Lehman Brothers, back in those days? And and that's the one that they sacrificed and got rid of. And I've known people that had many millions in there. I think over 25 million US dollars in Lehman Brothers, and they lost it all. They lost everything. And I don't know why somebody would put their entire fortunes in there. They justified it, well, it's the oldest bank in America, so, who would expect that would ever fail? But, surprise, guess again. So I would never do that. I don't care what the reputation of the bank is. Yeah, so the goal seems to be to make, to collapse Belgium, and Belgium doesn't want to play with that. So they're threatening Belgium now to give them the cold shoulder and, to become like a Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and can't play in any reindeer games, kicking them out, sort of like Viktor Orban the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And so that they're kind of a pariah or something within the European Union, just like Slovakia and Hungary, and maybe now soon probably the Czech Republic. And I see that even Italy is not playing along with everything that the European Union is. And a lot of these people are starting to realize that they're a bunch of pirates, and it's not a good look. It's just not a good look. Maybe they want to get back to normal. But then you have somebody that are like Ursula von der Leyen or Kaja Kallas. These are unelected people, and they have nothing to lose. They just get a whole bunch of money. These people are just collecting. I mean, you see a lot of the heads of the state, Merz and Starmer and Macron. These people are raking in the dough like you wouldn't believe, and a lot of people know about that. So, and I don't know if this is going to get exposed. A lot of these people, it never gets exposed. They keep it hush hush. Yeah. Fun, huh? So, anyway, periodically, even up to a few months ago, the EU and West, in general, they accuse Putin of abducting Ukrainian children. I'm sure you guys have heard of that. And it was Lindsey Graham, and probably with, they just want to get something on Putin. And I think they have this number, maybe over 1,000. I thought it was maybe 1,200, where they're accusing Vladimir Putin of abducting children. And to be accurate, I think they're even alluding to the fact that these were or are or supposed to be orphans, children from orphanages. But then they were from orphanages, I believe, almost in every case. And Russia did rescue a lot of these children, and it was like temporarily. They got them out of the war zone because, and as you know, Ukraine, they target anything they want to. They target schools and hospitals, very much like Israel. I always say how similar these two governments are. But Melania Trump, not too long ago, got involved in this, as you might know, and she has found out. I don't know if she's announcing this very loud, but maybe that's why you're not hearing it so much anymore from the United States, that these children are accounted for. And, or of course, Russia, just like usual, just like in this Bucha, they ask for a list of names of these people that, like in Bucha, how many were killed. Let's see the names. Who are these people? And who are these children? List these names of these children. And it turns out that virtually all of these children that Russia did save from war in the war zone, they have all been reunited. Sometimes even then they were with their families, some of these children. They were already reunited and they got them out of the war zones. But Russia has pretty much reunited most all of these children with relatives or family. And, the next part is pretty shocking. Let's see. Where was it? Yeah. But anyway, Melania Trump knows the truth of a lot of that. And I think she's even said it. But she's worked with them. And Russia has been working fully with them. And that's probably one reason I would think, when Melania is trying to say, this is a crock of bull. They're pinning this stuff on Russia when there's no truth to it whatsoever. And I'm thinking that might have some sort of influence on Donald Trump. As you know, his daughter influences him very much on being Israel first. So I'm thinking he's starting to now realize that Russia is actually dealing with him honestly, and the one who's lying to him is the side with the European Union and Zelensky. So that's probably why it looks like Donald Trump is showing that he doesn't have that much trust in Zelensky anymore, especially after all this money and everything is getting stolen. And, it's been turned out already. A lot of cheating. Like, who was this? Rezhnikov, I believe, that was getting huge amounts of money to feed the soldiers, and he was feeding them like some sort of a weak soup or broth or something, and most of the money was getting taken and by a bunch of corrupt other people. I mean, there's just so many frauds and theft of money and things in Ukraine. It's like makes your head spin. I even heard about this long ago. I heard this back in around the year 2000, that how corrupt Ukraine is. So someplace you want to stay away from. Wow. So let's put some gas on the fire here. On the fire that's Zelensky. Maria Zakharova, she disclosed, she's like a spokesperson from the government here in Russia. Anyway, she's disclosed that there's recent evidence, and normally they have the evidence. They wouldn't say that there is just evidence unless they have some of it themselves. That much of these orphans, thousands, not 1,000, not 1,200, thousands, and this is already known. I already mentioned this even many months ago, that some of them, a lot of them, and I didn't have a number, that turned up in Western Europe, particularly in Germany, some of these missing children. It's like, well, how did they get to Germany? Did Russia send them to Germany? Did Russia put them on a bus? Well, it turns out that Ukraine stole them from the very beginning. There's a lot of child theft, child trafficking. There's so much trafficking and things, and it's huge. It's huge in Ukraine. Drug trafficking, weapons trafficking, child trafficking, organs trafficking. You list it. Anything where there's some money, it's getting trafficked in Ukraine. Terrible. It's really terrible. I don't know who is going to solve this corruption in Ukraine. It is so vast. The only one I can think of that would probably be able to do it is Alexander Lukashenko of Belarus, but we don't want him. We don't want him to leave Belarus. I want him to stay here. But I don't know. Maybe they can make a one country, Belarus, Ukraine or something. And they are actually similar. Very similar language. Much more similar Ukrainian and Belarusian than even Ukrainian and Belarusian to Russian. So that is an interesting fact. And Lukashenko, he really likes Ukraine too. But let's keep going on this. So thousands of them, and it's been proven already. They even have names. And most recently, I guess she was putting this out because most recently there's evidence that a lot of these children, they went to Turkey. They even shipped them to Turkey. And I'm not saying that Turkey is necessarily any dirty guys or whatever, but it's maybe people there and maybe some local authorities or whatever. They were arranging for this. It's like a lot of times adoption. However, and this is where it gets even a little bit more interesting. The person apparently very much in charge of this trafficking, and she didn't necessarily say the Western European as well, but she was talking Turkey, and maybe it's generally speaking in all of these countries, It is Elena Zelensky. It is Zelensky's wife that is in charge of this child trafficking, taking these children and sending them off. And there's evidence that a lot of these, and I'm assuming this means in Turkey, or maybe through Turkey, or the ones that were trafficked to Turkey, and I don't know if it was in Turkey, but a lot of them have been sexually abused, and sometimes many times. So they're stealing these children for sex crimes. And I tell you what, if you guys have heard about this, I mean, it's something it's terrible to even think about, especially if you have a child or a daughter, and sometimes even boys and things. There is some really sick people. A lot of these people, they have a lot of money and things. And so this Epstein thing, and I don't know, it's actually pretty sick that Donald Trump is going to be covering for Epstein. And I don't know the extent of what Epstein, I guess there's many thousands of videos and some things. And I don't know if it was just these somewhat underage girls, if you think of, some girls, they've reached at least puberty or something, maybe like at 14 and stuff like that, and it's very distasteful, but when you're talking, I don't even want to say it. Just young children, it's sick. It's sick. It's just sick stuff, So another part of, I don't know if it's trafficking, but it's some corruption in Ukraine. I've mentioned this a lot of times. They have these things where they call people, particularly old people, on the telephone, and they say that they're from the government and that they owe some kind of money and that they have to pay this fine or whatever before, otherwise we're going to take more money, or, or there's going to be a penalty fee on top of that or whatever. But they do that, and they warn, like mentioned it in other videos, they warn you on the metro and things there when you're sitting in there, and they talk about, they're warning people about, getting these phone calls from people, and saying that you should pay some money because a lot of telephone scams and things like that. Most of them are run mostly through Ukraine. I don't know if there's any done in Belarus. There might actually be. A matter of fact, I have gotten something. I can't remember. That was a long time ago. I don't know if they were trying to sell some kind of a wonder medicine or vitamin, or I don't know. I can't remember for sure. But anyway, this stuff happens over here too. It's like the Nigerian prince that calls you and says that for some reason they can't get their money and they need to have your bank account information so they can transfer the money to your bank account and they'll split it with you or something like that. Anyway, and I don't want to, say bad things about Nigeria. I've met some really decent, great people, doctors and medical students and things like that from Nigeria. So a lot of very, very great people. And I think, isn't that where Donald Trump is not starting to say now that he's going to do something, but they're killing Christians or something like that? I don't know. Donald Trump's coming up with a lot of stuff. And there might even be some sort of gangs or whatever in Nigeria doing that, but he's acting like it's the government, just like cocaine labs. I think he said there's 3 cocaine labs in Colombia, and I'll get to that anyway when he's saying he's going to now start the land war against Venezuela, and he's going to extend that to Colombia, and he said he's going to be attacking 3 cocaine, laboratories in Colombia very soon, and he's acting like it's the government running them or something. Like Chavez, Maduro. Yeah. So also, as far as child trafficking, I got to add this. I remember this. This was a report before, and they were acting, and I think Russia even did some kind of strikes in Kharkiv at one point, and it was like a year and a half ago. And so Ukrainian soldiers went through and they were going to a lot of the houses and things. And what they did is they told the parents that they're going to be like a militia force, and they took the children. They confiscated their children. And these people have, I think, maybe in every case, I know there's hundreds of cases, and they've never seen their children again. And those were a lot of times the children, I believe, that were sent to places like Germany and in Western Europe, especially those children. And so parents have reported that. And I don't know if some parents haven't reported it. I don't know if something has happened to them for those reasons. I don't know. Okay. But the Ukrainian, I guess, forces are saying, oh, it's for their safety, to keep your children safe. Okay. Yeah. Oh, I've noticed Trump, he must have seen one of my videos. I like to kid around a lot. This is not serious. That he saw one of my videos. You know, he was one of the 45 or however. I don't know. I get various, sometimes I get 300 lately. I had one time I had 2,000. Once I had 4,700 people saw a video. But anyway, but it's like, he must have seen one of mine where I said these people in the EU should rent an apartment together. I should get a room together, because they have these meetings after meetings, and every second friggin' day they have a meeting. Zelensky is seeing these people, and 3 days later, he sees the same people, you know, and they're meeting up to figure out some new angles of some plots of how they can screw over Russia and maybe trick Trump and trick all the people, you know, at large, you know, about whatever the heck they're doing, and come up with a different angle. You know, they come up with all these ways to seize the frozen Russian assets. But anyway, Trump said something about that the other day. So he mentioned my video. Now, he didn't mention my video, but I said they should get an apartment. And I guess through this Caroline Levitt, his White House press secretary, she said, and this is her words, Trump is sick of meetings and wants the conflict between Ukraine and Russia to end. Because when this country that I was in before, you know, in the Caribbean, it's very strange. And I remember there was meetings about for example, the airlines. They had a local Caribbean Airlines, and it was all part of, they call it the shareholder governments. So, you know, most of the governments had various shares in this airline, and you know, it was called Liat, L-I-A-T. And so the governments kind of owned it. And, you know, it's kind of strange when this thing was bought or created, you know, the prices of flights really went up really high. And they have all these meetings, and there's all of these board members, and it's like huge amounts of people. And they split up the money, a lot of this money. And they got a lot of money. The governments were taking huge sums of money from people that are getting tickets to fly all over. And there's a lot of poor people in the Caribbean, and they can't go anywhere. You know, the prices, they went up like quadrupled. And you know, all of a sudden now they can't go anywhere. And there's no boats like from St. Vincent to Barbados or whatever. That'd be a long boat ride. Maybe there were a couple, but it's not really passenger boats and things. So it got really difficult for regular people there. I didn't make any flights really either anymore. That's one reason why I hardly went anywhere to any other countries while I was there. Because I'll tell you what, let me tell you a thing. You know, you get like a 15 or 20-minute flight to go from St. Vincent to Barbados, and the cost of that flight is more than flying from Barbados to England. So think of that on some little plane, you know, and they get cheap fuel from Venezuela, much cheaper than these flights that are like Virgin Travel or British Airways. You know, so that's pretty ridiculous. It's a really terrible thing to exploit your own people. I mean, leave it to a lot of governments. I mean, especially in the West, they really love doing that. So, and it's even like in Germany, like I'm telling you, even when it was really cheap to get fuel. I tell you what, taking a train ride in Germany to go, like, say, from Werdau to Leipzig, and I can go all the way across Belarus for far less money, which is like the same distance, than I can just for that trip, just to go in there. It's like, if I take, I'll tell you what, there's something called the electricity train. If I take that, I would pay, like, in euros, maybe €1.50. And in Germany, to make that trip, to go from Werdau to Leipzig, I pay, back then it was like 26 euros. So it was about 25 times more expensive. I mean, talk about ripping off your own people. But anyway, but that electricity train is very slow. If you want to take a regular train, I think it was, it's like one third the price of what you would pay in Germany. And it's actually even a better train, the one here, even if it's one third the price, if you go on the really nice train, regional. So, okay, keep going here. So these people in Kharkiv, like I said, they never saw their children again. A lot of them. I don't know if some of them in the meantime have. So this stuff kind of leaks out, and maybe Zelensky has to take it a little easy. You know, they make a lot of money just selling kids and selling weapons and drugs and organs. Okay, and robbing people and, you know, what do they call it? Call centers. Yeah. So, oh no, I passed that part. Look at this. I'm getting Joe Biden-y. I was talking already about Carolyn Levitt. Yes, okay. Now let's talk about another, I mean, not just Zelensky, but what did Donald Trump Jr. call him? The greatest salesman in the world, Zelensky. But let's talk about another, I guess you couldn't say a great salesman, world champion con artist Ben Shapiro. This guy, he's in kind of a meltdown too, kind of like Tim Pool. I don't know, these people, I think that some sort of a thirst for notoriety, for popularity, you know, on YouTube, you know. I'm guessing though, but Ben Shapiro, of course, his little empire, the Daily Wire, really collapsed after he fired Candace Owens, and Candace Owens shot up like a star, and he collapsed like a, I don't know, like a turd that the flies don't even want to sit on anymore. I don't know. So Ben Shapiro, yeah, he came out with his great geopolitical wisdom. You know, oh, it's so simple. He makes you think this way. What? If you sit here, you got to sit here and talk about Ben Shapiro. He goes by what you're supposed to know and what you're not supposed to know. He kind of leaves out, you know, the real truth that will actually tell you what's really going on. So he plays along with that. He goes with like official story sort of things, and sometimes he comes up with some things that will serve his purpose that are not official story, and most of the time not even true. And he fudges, I don't know, Don, I tell you what, the guy's even annoying for me to listen to. So I don't, but you know, sometimes these things come up and I say, well, okay, I'll listen to this. Anyway, Ben Shapiro, what did he come up with? His wisdom. He says Russia retaining the Donbass, you know, the place that they've been fighting for the entirety of this war. He said saying Russia, he says Russia will return again. If Russia can retain the Donbass, they'll come back again in 5 years to take more. And as you all know, that the European Union is planning, they really, really badly want to start a war with Russia. Some people are now saying 2027. You know, that's just around the corner. But there were some people not long ago in the European Union, they were saying, well, we have to maybe get this going in 2028. But otherwise, they have a plan to start in 2029 or 2030. That's when they, you know, they're all getting together and saying, well, let's get this war going there. So, but they have to actually, obviously, because if they want to hold the moral high ground, which obviously is a kind of what they thought they were doing with this special military operation, and it worked for a large part, you know. Oh, Putin invaded Ukraine unprovoked, you know, which was very badly provoked. I mean, if you don't call killing 13,000 people a provocation, I don't know, maybe you need to go see a psychiatrist. But anyway, they're going to try to provoke Russia for this. And Ben Shapiro, he's thinking, you know, obviously, he's, you know, oh no, there's not going to be a provocation that Russia's going to attack again in 5 years. So he's going to look and say, see, I mean, he's going to come back, definitely. He'll probably still be around in some form or whatever. They just not crashed and burned completely, and say, see, I told you they'd come back, you know, and want for more. But what's going to happen, obviously, if Russia walks away, and if it's, you know, Zelensky, he would be best suited if he actually tries to go for peace exactly the way Russia is asking for it right now. Because otherwise, Odessa is going to go. And you see so many people, Colonel Douglas McGregor keeps talking about it, Odessa. And so many people in Russia, they will be really, very angry if Russia does not go for that Russian city. And of course, there's Kharkiv. For the most part, Kiev is a Russian city. A lot of these things are all Russian cities, and they're not Ukrainian. And these people in the Donbass, one reason why Zelensky made war against eastern Ukraine, what for the most part brought Russia into this, you know, and invaded, you know, into that area is because they had far less respect for those people, and they wanted them gone. They wanted them ethnically cleansed and to bring their master race Ukrainians in, and only those Russians that will agree to being slaves of the master race Ukrainians would be allowed to stay, in Donbass. So anyway, I guess they didn't like that in Donbass for some reason. I don't know. I mean, hey, be a slave, at least you get fed, don't you? It's better than in some places, that you're not a slave because you can't even get food. Anyway, I don't want to talk about that. But there's some truth to that, by the way. I'm not going to play Ben Shapiro here on you. Tucker made a video. I guess this might have something to do with Tucker's video. Tucker made a video saying how the world and the United States in particular, because he's kind of America First type of guy, that the United States would be much better off to have Russia as a friend than a lot of these other people, such as the European Union. And obviously, if you think about it, the United States shares values, traditional values with Russia, maybe more than they do with Europe now. Biden and I guess starting with Obama, they drastically changed Europe into some sort of a weirdo liberal sort of a deal. That the United States has now switched back, with the Trump thing, to stop, trying to force children to, get a sex change and all these, whatever crazy stuff they come up with. And there's a lot of it, I guess, that you can say that you're a fox, or that, because you identify with being a fox, so you can say you're a fox. And I don't know. And Ben Shapiro, he was even against that stuff. But Ben Shapiro, I think he's doing this to take a contra against Tucker Carlson. He seems a very vengeful guy. It's very incredible. What you're seeing right now, you see like this Tim Pool, incredibly vengeful. And he was not really even attacked by Candace Owens at all. It was just some little thing. And he flipped out. He lost it all. And he totally discredited himself. And Ben Shapiro right now, he's full of spit and vinegar after Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson. And I thought these people were all on the right at one point in time. But of course, Ben Shapiro, a lot of this is that he wants to get the pedophiles off free, the billionaire pedophiles. He maybe get a lot of money from them. Maybe that's one of his big supporters and a lot of them, unfortunately, are Jewish. There's a lot of Jewish, maybe, what is his name? Alan Dershowitz and all that. He went to Zelensky's island, and a lot of these other people. But, obviously Israel would be going after the goy. They wouldn't be necessarily, doing this to gain control over Alan Dershowitz, who's firmly on their side anyway. So, but maybe it's as leverage. Maybe they got some tapes, and now it's all in hiding, and Pam Bondi, and maybe even it looks like Kash Patel and all that. They were saying they're going to expose all this. They have lists and all that. Oh, geez, I don't even have to go into that. It's one of the biggest, not even a conspiracy, the biggest things that are exposed in the past year was this Epstein stuff. So, but anyway, Tucker coming up with sensible things. He said peace with Russia would not. Oh no. This was from Ben Shapiro. Peace with Russia would not be good for the U.S. Yeah, because I guess you need an enemy. I guess Hitler actually that was Hitler's theory. You need a common enemy to unite the people up against, to go after. So no, he chose the Jews, I guess. Well, anyway, it was before that. Yeah, but I guess the theory was made after that. Okay. Zelensky says he wants I guess it's a countrywide referendum. And for that, he needs a ceasefire. And I guess that's to find out if Donbass should go to Russia or not, at least for him. I mean, what is it going to do? They're going to be fighting about this. Russia is victorious, and then they're going to say, oh, well, okay, the referendum, you go ahead and you take it all. We just were fighting for nothing. All those millions of people, both sides, it was all just for nothing. And you win, and we were fighting for nothing. Yeah, sure, Russia's going to want to do that, right? Wow. And of course, those people in Donbass will never sit for it. They would declare independence from Russia if Russia would ever sign for something. So it's not going to happen. Anyway. And I think, you know, when you think of like the EU and Zelensky, and it's like, I was thinking like a pack of hungry wolves taking a vote to see if they should eat the chicken or let the chicken go. So let's take a vote. Are we going to eat this chicken or are we going to let it go? You know, yeah. Hungry wolves. Hungry. I said hungry. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Medvedev, former president of Russia, he tweeted that the junkie Führer, Slava Ukraina, the junkie Führer straight up gave the White House the finger. So he's saying Zelensky's, you know, giving the finger to the United States and trying to stall the negotiations. A lot of people are accusing, you know, Zelensky's looking for tricks. And they're stalling. You know, it's like, what are they stalling for? They're stalling because they need more people. They're trying to gather up more forces. And what good is that friggin' going to do? Russia is got the momentum, big time momentum at the moment. And the European Union, if they're going to try to go into Ukraine, they're not going to be ready for a long time. Or is Zelensky trying to stall till after these midterm elections that come up? And that's like 11 months from now, nearly 11 months. You think he can stall this for 11 months? I don't think so. And Donald Trump, I guess it's to his advantage, is to get this done before that, because he wants to put to put a feather in his hat or another arrow in his quiver, you know. And so he needs some sort of a victory to be and he's actually going around like the peace president. And apparently, they started this fight up with Cambodia and Thailand. And he says he got a call and stopped it again. And then looks like, what was it? Thailand, bombed a casino last night. Anyway, even in spite of a new, I guess, ceasefire, and who knows what Cambodia is going to do. I don't know. We'll see. It's just not so easy. You don't get on the telephone call and, you got to really start hashing some things out. Sometimes it would be easy, but I don't know. It's not that way between Russia and Ukraine because these people have been indoctrinating their own people in Ukraine for many decades, at least from the 1950s. Some people, you can put it even much earlier, back even into 1918. So for various different other reasons when this ideology was starting to pop up in a way. So also, what else we got here going on? Boris Johnson, he came out of hibernation again. His hair is all messed up. You can tell he was hibernating because his hair is all, wait a minute. Maybe that's his regular style. But anyway, his hair was all messed up. And I thought he was coming out of hibernation. I hadn't seen him for a little while. It's a little bit early, though, isn't it? It's still wintertime. He's saying the West has to turn up the heat on Putin. And he was like implicating, and of course, he's not the Prime Minister of Britain anymore, so he can make somebody else be the fall guy. So he's basically saying that, when they make these threats to Russia, that they have to back them up. Like said, you do this or else, and what he's meaning by backing up is for the most part with military action, So Boris Johnson, well, I'll tell you what, it's so easy to talk. It's just like the European Union or even Ursula von der Leyen to talk when it's somebody else's children or somebody else dying, It's very easy. Then you're really brave. It's almost like the Baltic states, the Chihuahua, with their 4,000-man military, really threatening Russia. They're threatening Russia with annihilation like Estonia. And, it's pretty easy when you have the United States, promising you tanks and fighter jets that they're going to bomb Russia if Russia lays a finger on you. And I don't even think the Russians really care so much about that. They're just letting these little Baltic states yap and yap. But I tell you, you go ahead and try some stuff on Russia. Just try that on Kaliningrad. Try to block the shipping in the Baltic Sea, and then find out what happens. What is that? FAO? Yeah, F around and find out. And FO. Something Hegseth likes to use. And by the way, you probably all heard that they're trying to impeach the guy as a murderer, and I tell you what, Then they got to throw a lot of people in there. They got to throw maybe Joe Biden in there and Obama, definitely Obama. How many people, how much blood is on their hands? You know, Obama signed off. Remember when you had to sign off on drone strikes? He signed off on drone strikes against children playing soccer and bombing weddings and, you know, killing the entire people going to celebrate two people getting married, the bride and groom, and killing them all, you know, and then making jokes and laughing about it on the golf course afterwards. Boy, a lot of stuff. Okay. Tucker did an interview, and I'm assuming it was in the last day or so. This was real a shock. This was a real shock interview. Now, this is something I didn't know. I didn't know what was going on, and I was very, very curious about this, and this is about Israel. Did you ever wonder how is it that Israel knew so easily on how to target where these either so-called terrorists or alleged terrorists or whatever, where they were at, and they could pinpoint them and drop a bomb right on top of them? Did you ever wonder, or even in a moving car, that some car way out somewhere, or somebody, you know, hey, when they're out in a picnic, maybe out in the forest, and Israel knew exactly where they are, pinpointing them, dropped a bomb right on top of them and killed them? How? And I was thinking, how in the heck? I know, I was thinking drones. I didn't know what that. How is Israel doing this? Pinpointing these people to know exactly where they are. If that's ever been hitting your mind, I'll tell you. And this, like I said, is a big shock. This was one of the biggest shocks I've heard in a long, long time. There's somebody that works for the United Nations. She's a lawyer. And, what does it say? These women should F up. What is it? Nick Fuentes said, you know, you see all these women coming up with this stuff. You know, Maria Zakharova. I have a lot of women are my heroes, I'll tell you what. I like Kim Iverson. I like Candace Owens. And a lot of these are contributing to the truth movement much more than most all men are. I mean, it's incredible stuff. But anyway, that's why it really bothered me when Nick Fuentes said that. But anyway, there's this woman, and she's like Italian, and she got her, maybe it's her first degree in England, and I don't know, does it say here? London, I guess, University of London, you know, probably a decent college. And then she got other degree in, I think she did human rights, and she got a degree like in human rights and in some sort of international law. I guess maybe that was at Pisa. I've been to Pisa too. And in northern Italy, as you know. And right now she is working on a PhD at Amsterdam. So she's been around. She's not really super old or nothing like that. So, but you would think, you know, getting all these degrees and then also working for the United Nations. But she came up with some things. And anyway, she's been trying to, you know, find ways for protection for the Palestinian people. And Donald Trump, strangely enough, he hates her with a passion. And she's a single person like that was part of the United Nations. Donald Trump put massive sanctions on this woman, Francesca Albanese. Albanese is her name. Francesca Albanese, I'll repeat it again. And she speaks English too, so you'll find interviews in English. And people in the U.S. government essentially are not even allowed to talk to her. You know, they're banned from talking to her. You know, she's got a lot of information and apparently a lot of proof. And when I tell you this, you'll know that it's not even you need to have any documented proof, because you know that this works. So catch this stuff. So she's been, I guess, assigned to the Palestinian territory since May of 2022. You know, I looked up this stuff anyway. And so her crime, her very terrible crime, is that she found out that the U.S., you know, like a lot of companies, pension funds, and tech companies. And she mentioned the company that owns the platform that I am speaking to you on, that you were looking at me with. She mentioned that the big umbrella company that owns this platform, and she mentioned Microsoft, and she mentioned Amazon, and others, quite a few others. And these companies, they're helping Israel to target and pinpoint, target and kill Palestinians. And it's not just these people that are alleged terrorists. It's a lot of these people. Somebody got a beef against Palestinian or whatever, that they don't like them, or for who knows whatever reason. And it's not just Palestinians, obviously. It's Lebanese, because they're doing the same thing. As you see, they can target and hit people. They know somehow where they're at. And Lebanon, Syria, wherever. Qatar, even. Qatar, you saw that hit in Qatar. And I'll tell you what, you know how they do this? But these companies, these tech companies, these U.S. tech companies, they're working with Israel. When you do these... what do they call that? I don't know what the word is, but your location. When you give Google, these companies permission to, access your location at where you are, and they use children's apps, because a lot of these people, they have children. These so-called terrorists, I don't know, some of them maybe are they, or freedom fighters, whatever you want to call them. But anyway, a lot of them have children. So these children, they have their apps, and hey, even taxis, if you want, your location, for the next taxi, and you call it and they know where you're at and where the taxi is and how long it's going to take to get, all this stuff. Anyway, these people are working with the Israeli military, the IDF, and they're locating these people. And Israel doesn't have to send out any drones or anything. They just say the people they want. They know exactly where they're at. They can sit there and watch it on a computer, on a map, maybe on a cell phone, any kind of device, and then just press a button and missiles launched, and they kill these people and their children, their whole families and everything. A lot of time it is with children's apps. So these, you have your daughter has a cell phone, bye-bye, your car is just hit, moving cars, no drone anywhere in sight, but the missile will find you. It's locked in on that signal. Wow. So that's how it's done, everybody. Yes, scary stuff. And now, we have AI coming in and all this, and you don't know what the future is going to bring, and it makes you really wonder. I mean, hey, if you all know 1984, well, this stuff is beyond 1984. I'm talking the George Orwellian 1984. Did you ever imagine that? It's not like they have to have spies and tail you. They know where you're at, based on your cell phone for the most part. Jeez. Anyway, scary stuff. What's going to happen in the future? And I'm sure they definitely know where I am then as well. Uh-oh. I'm probably on some hit list. I'm serious too. Kim Iverson, she put up a video titled Trump Now, okay, this is a good one. Trump now forces tourists to show 5 years of social media. This is right in line with this kind of stuff I just mentioned to you. So by using your social media, and of course most people are going to delete all of that stuff before they go to the United States as soon as they know about this. But I don't know what happens if it's deleted, if you don't have any social media things. And as a matter of fact, there was a guy here, an American, and when he went to Russia, anyway, I don't want to get into it too much, but anyway, he deleted all that stuff and said, I'll be out of the net, and, you can't contact me, and deleting this stuff. Some people, they don't, want anybody to get some wrong idea about them, So she showed a clip of Donald Trump at a rally saying how much he is against anyone who protests against Israel's behavior, or anyone who is in support of, any of these groups that are supporting an independent Palestine. So Donald Trump, he said that at a rally, clearly and obviously, as Kim pointed out, and so many others. Trump is Israel first. He's an Israel first guy. He's probably more Israel first. Israel, and I've said this from the very beginning. I don't know why very few people, I know that some people said it many months after I did, 5 months at least after I said this originally, that Israel is the one that put Donald Trump in the White House. As we all know, the deep state, whatever that is, there's all kinds of these different parts of the deep state, and Israel is part of the deep state in their own term anyway, but they're a little bit of a separate part of it. And, they don't like Donald Trump, the other parts of the deep state. And So they were, and George Soros doesn't make it a secret. He said before he's going to get Donald Trump. He wants to destroy Donald Trump, And, one reason why Donald Trump went against U.S. aid, that's a Soros organization with CIA. I mean, all these, what a mess, all of these deep state peoples. But anyhow, so how could Donald Trump possibly make it into the White House without the help of the deep state? Well, like I just said, Israel, they're partners also to a certain extent at times with the deep state, but they're their own entity. And there's nobody else that has the power to put Donald Trump there when the deep state is against you. Look at, they foiled him. Israel didn't really take a hand, against this Joe Biden stuff. Maybe Israel thought Donald Trump was going to get it. And Donald Trump was big time winning until like 4 o'clock in the morning when something happened. You guys all know about that stuff. But anyway, so we all know about this. So Donald Trump, I don't know. So what is he going to go? He's against anybody who, technically speaking, who is against the genocide of the Palestinians. Basically, that is what that all comes down to. He comes out sometimes and said some different words and things. Oh yeah, well, like this. But it's not like, it's much different. When you're talking, I don't know, is Donald Trump some kind of a racist? Is he a racist? Or what is the word when you hate a certain religion, like Muslims or something like that? Maybe he thinks all Muslims are radical or whatever. And of course, a lot of people in the West, and please, anybody listening out there, don't fall into this. Do not fall into this trap that Muslims are bad. You have this crap coming on in the UK, and a lot of those people certainly are Muslims and all that. And a lot of them, I'll tell you what, for the most part, it isn't really even their fault. It's the fault of the friggin' government of the UK for coming up with these policies to ship in all these people. And they think, oh, economically, we have to do that because our people aren't having enough babies. So we have to keep shipping in other people that have lots of babies, the culture be damned, So I'm not blaming any of those people at all, but of course, when they get there, it is, of course, annoying when they try to say that their culture should now be prevalent and the British culture should be wiped out. But a lot of them, they don't even say that. They're not even part of that. They don't like being targeted either. So it's like trying to do everything possible to get everybody to fight against each other, and nobody's going to look at the real root causes of what the heck is going on. And of course, it's the government. Anyway, but so then now what are you going to do now that they got a whole bunch of these people? But I'm not talking about only the UK, this in Germany. And, like I've said before, and this is even a fact, that when there's a lot of times crimes committed in Germany, Germans know this. And you can find podcasts of Germans talking about this. So when there's a crime committed and it's done by some of these migrants and stuff, you're not allowed. The news is not allowed to say that they're migrants that are doing it, or rapes and things like that. And a lot of rapes, so many rapes, and they're covered up in Germany. Thinking, oh, if we don't talk about them, they're going to go away. Well, how did that work for these people in the UK? You got these what is it? Well, a whole bunch of these groups of these Pakistani men, and I'm not blaming Pakistanis either. But anyways, there was some group that came in, and of course they're like grooming British women to be their prostitutes and all. And the government chose to ignore it and not mention it on all this. And then it got out of hand. And I guess Keir Starmer, he was to a large part complicit in doing this. So it's like, what? Why? I don't know. And that's one of the things that what is his name? Tommy Robinson is become popular for. And I think he's a very pro-Israel. And it's a lot like Nick Fuentes, who seems to be pro-Israel as well. I was thinking he's against this genocide. I'm not even friggin' sure anymore. I don't really know. Maybe shouldn't even watch Nick Fuentes. Like I said, a lot of the stuff, he makes sense in a small way. I don't know. It's too much of a headache. Somebody wrote in a comment yesterday and on one of the videos about that Nick Fuentes I think he's kind of alluding to a fact that in a certain way that Nick Fuentes is like a psyop, and probably for pro-Israel. I mean, haven't we heard that one before? Like Ben Shapiro is definitely overt. We see that he is, and he admits it. And maybe even Nick Fuentes is part of this, but covertly, maybe. I don't know, because he seems to love a lot of things and speak very highly about Israeli society and its whatever they're doing there. And then somebody else, I think, commented on that guy's comment. I left a comment to that guy, and I'm just made a comment. I don't know. I don't want anybody to get me wrong. I don't know so much about Nick Fuentes. I don't really I don't watch the guy so much. I just saw some of these things. It's very interesting. Some things I like, a lot of things I don't like at all. I don't know. And some people just say he's entertaining. It's not that they even have any opinion whatsoever about what he says, but he's entertaining, I guess. Maybe that he's stirring people up. I don't know. Interesting. Very interesting. So now where was I? Okay, well, Trump, I get the impression Trump actually, I hate to say it, he kind of pretty much hates Muslims, I'm guessing. You know, because he's never done anything for any Muslims at all. And he's maybe never known any, you know, and maybe some actually are a little bit radical, or some hold views that I don't like either, I'm sure. But then they're not bothering me. Hey, there's some Christians that have some views I don't like either. I don't know. Come on, you know. And there's so much you can talk about how it should be between Christians and Muslims. They're actually far closer, like brotherly, than Jews are to Christians. And there'll be some people probably say, how dare you say that? Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know. Maybe because there's the book of Jesus is in the Quran, and a lot of Jews, they hate Jesus. A lot of Israelis say if Jesus ever showed his face on the face of the earth again, they'd kill him again. And the Muslims love Jesus. I mean, so how do I get that opinion? I don't know. Anyway, so, and I'm not against Jews either, because a lot of Jews know that a lot of this stuff is not, they don't take a lot of this stuff super serious. These are the whole bunch of crap in maybe the Quran and in the Bibles and in your Torah and all that maybe people say, that's a little bit extreme, you know, that probably thought that way in those olden days. And, you know, you can't have those views now. It's going to get you into some trouble, but I don't want to get involved. That's why I stay away from that stuff. I'm not a member of any religion. Anybody that doesn't bother, you know, and steal the property or the lives or disrespect other people, I'm fine with them. So anyway, so we got Donald Trump, you know, and he's going after people with a vengeance that like Marjorie Taylor Greene. If you don't like the actions of Israel, it's like you are really evil to some people. And it's like, what the heck, you know? If you're not for killing a whole bunch of innocent people, then you're the bad one? I don't know where that comes from, you know? Like Mike Pompeo and these people, I don't really know. And remember old Piers Morgan. Piers Morgan, he was in favor of all that, but at least, I don't even know what. I don't understand Piers Morgan. Is he putting on acts all the time and playing around and like, is he this and that? I don't have any idea, but now he doesn't like that, you know, killing all those children. Maybe he's got so many guests on there that he was trying to show them up and discredit them, that like Roger Waters, you know, from Pink Floyd and all that. And now he kind of had to switch over a little bit, you know. Anyway, yes, but Israel does own a lot. I don't know. Nick Fuentes, I kind of agree with him a lot on that stuff. Then why does he love Israel? You know, I guess it works both ways. If just because you don't like the actions of Israel does not mean that you're anti-Semitic. And maybe Nick Fuentes, it's a little bit turned the other way on another thing. So he can love Israel, but not like a lot of the stuff Israel does? Maybe. I have no idea. Okay. Recently, I was mentioning biolabs in Ukraine. Now, this is a very touchy subject. Okay. Someone even wrote a comment saying they never hear of it. And it's probably, maybe the person means in the West. You know, we hear about it periodically over here. Maybe once every couple months at least. You hear about things come up with these, what do you say, biolabs, chemical weapons and all that. And you're not allowed to say a certain word with it, because I've already been removed and gotten strikes 2 times for saying this. So, you know, you shouldn't ever mention the word weapons whenever you're saying this word that starts with a B and ends with a labs. So you got to be careful on that. Wow. So with this incursion into Ukraine, you know, Zelensky had put out an order. I don't know if it was the day before or the day after the special military operation. Probably the day after, because you never know that it's going to happen. So the day after, he ordered all of that that material in 46 labs, all of it to be destroyed. Destroy all the records, and maybe, I'm assuming, destroy all of the evidence of what was going on in those laboratories. And this is a fact. This is a known fact. You can find it in Ukrainian history, that was said. Destroy all of that stuff. And so with this incursion of Russia into Ukraine, Russia, some of the stuff did not really get destroyed, or maybe they didn't think it was incriminating enough, so Russia got a hold of it. And they've even shown it, and it's like U.S. documents and talking about, things that they're doing and all that, and even a lot of the evidence of some of the experiments that they were doing. And have you ever heard of genetic weapons? So anyway, Russia's got a lot of the documentation and some of the evidence, some of even the equipment that they were using to do like maybe even some gene sequencing and things like that. And the guy that was exposing most all of this was General Igor Kirillov. And Ukraine assassinated him, the SBU, him and his, and they've admitted it. And they thought it, they call him a war criminal because he exposed a lot of this stuff. So they killed him and his assistant when they were going to work in the morning, I guess, in Moscow. And Igor Kirillov, and very brave for putting out all this information, really incriminating stuff, and showing a lot of the things on screen, photographic evidence of the documentation from the United States and all that. I mean, and it's not even just that exposed it. Even a lot of the people in the U.S. government exposed it. And that's actually what came out. And this was just yesterday, I believe. So they put a bomb in a scooter. It was a scooter bomb or something. And believe it or not, it was December 17th, 2024, almost to the day, exactly 1 year. So the anniversary is going to be on the 17th of this month, just, 3 days from now or so. Like I said, I got to be careful talking about this. And it's just a coincidence, right? That the Russian military, just yesterday, they released more information on the U.S. and Ukraine collaboration on this project. And the use of these weapons, of course, they've been using them on Russian soldiers, a lot of them, even now, a lot of the stuff that they have. And I get shocked sometimes that they even admitted it. You'd think that, Russians would say, I'm not going to listen to that. I'm not going to get, some of these things are really nasty. I don't know if they're using those nasty ones. They did mention some of the stuff because they found supplies of it, that Ukraine has this. And I don't recognize those, and the name of it, maybe it's some kind of a nerve agent, but I remember I told you guys, even I was going through a lot of this chemical weapons training in the military, and it's some really terrible stuff. And you hear about how really excruciating and horrible deaths that you go through if you're ever exposed to some of these things. Absolutely excruciating and horrible. And we had to ingest chemical weapons in the Army as well. And I've had to do it on like 3 occasions, and I don't like it at all. Very uncomfortable, but those were not super, super bad, and they probably did damage me and many, many thousands of people probably in the U.S. military that actually had to go through this stuff, the weapons training. I told you all about lining up, and then, they call it the disco hut when you go into this thing and you get exposed to chemical weapons. That's a light thing, a CS gas, it's banned in pretty much all over the world. But anyway, we had to get exposed to it. So you go inside there, and the training cadre were sitting there and watching you when you walked out, laughing at you because you are really in distress. Your eyes were really, and I have sensitive eyes, really hurting eyes, and I guess you have snot, hanging down to your knees from your nose and all kinds of stuff, and you're coughing and you can't see straight, and there's a track you're supposed to walk around in the fresh air. And I don't even know if that's actually I think they found out afterwards that's not a good idea. You're not supposed to do any physical exertion anyway. And of course we had to do it. Even later on, years later, even after getting gassed, you have to do it. And I guess that's a big no-no for your health. So, and anyway, and that post is shut down now because it's illegal to go there because of the weapons poisoning. So it's Fort McClellan. It was called Fort McClellan, Alabama, and you can look it up. Alabama, Greenbow, Alabama. No, it's by Anniston, I think. What was the town? In Alabama, Fort McClellan. You can look it up on Wikipedia or Google or something, and they'll tell you that it's closed down. And there's areas of that where no humans are allowed to go because of the chemical stuff. Just putting this stuff in. It's not part of this. What Russia put out anyway. Anyway, some nasty stuff and no fun. I don't like that stuff. I didn't even like the COVID shots. I'm against all this stuff. So, so what else did Russia say about this? That they're putting out a lot of information, and it shows the collaboration between the United States and Ukraine. And they were talking about 38 of these biolabs. And Victoria Nuland, and you see it, I think, testifying in front, I believe it's in front of the Senate, and she's talking that they had 46 biolabs in Ukraine. And of course, Russia was going in, they moved a lot of them. Some are in Africa. I think they even have one or two in Kazakhstan. It's kind of an ally of Russia. A lot of them in Africa. They moved them to Africa. I guess they can get away with it. You get a smaller country that doesn't have the means to protect themselves, and they just force their will upon them. And maybe that's what they have in store for some of these other countries in the Caribbean too, to move some of these things like there. And what the United States was doing in there is really nasty. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. This is a long video. Sorry about this, guys. And luckily, Trump put an end to a lot of this stuff. And Biden, as you all know, Biden in Rosemont, Seneca, they were invested in these laboratories. They are invested making these weapons and doing this research. Like I said, through his company, Rosemont, Seneca. Probably for a long time. And some of the stuff that they were doing, and they did a lot of these experiments, and that's what was exposed yesterday from the Russian government, that they were using a lot of these experiments on Ukrainian people, on their own population. I mean, it's bad enough, they were using it in war against the Russians, but they're doing experiments. And I remember, and I don't even think they're even talking about this experiment, but I read about this because it was really shocking to me when I read about this one experiment. And the experiment was against 48, and they were service members, Ukrainian military people. That's when they had more people. They can't spare them anymore. Maybe they'll take the ethnic Russian ones, but they probably were ethnic Russians when they did it before, these other ones, with these 48 soldiers. And they were doing genetic things with them, and they're trying to get a weapon, and like the Israelis were working on this for a long time, genetic weapons. I think I'm able to talk about this stuff on YouTube. We'll see. Maybe this is going to get deleted, but anyway, genetic weapons, and Israel was working on a lot of these, and trying to isolate certain genes, and to where when they can use a virus and it will not affect certain people, but other people it will affect. So that's not a nice thing, and it looks like the United States was heavily involved in doing that sort of a thing as well. But in Ukraine, using, I think, a lot of time Ukrainian, but it's a lot of it, this was done, and the paperwork was in English, because they show a lot of the paperwork, not in this, what I saw, but they've shown it before. And so, so this Defense Department guy, he said that it came out, and especially with the Trump administration, because they even, a lot of this stuff came out, that all of this information, and that I've said in videos a while back, all of it is true, and it is verified even by the Trump administration, and it's been verified through people during the Biden administration as well. Like I just said, it was with Victoria Nuland. She said it, and you see the video footage right there that she's admitting this sort of thing. And then John Kirby was also, that the guy that has some weird thing with his mouth or something that worked for Joe Biden, one of the top guys of Joe Biden, he has admitted these programs were existing. And RFK Jr., who's now Donald Trump's health guy, and a lot of people hate him and trying to get rid of him very, very badly. So, and maybe partly because of this sort of thing, because he's actually saying this stuff, and they want to keep a lot of this stuff secret. It's just sort of like Marjorie Taylor Greene with Trump, and Trump really has a hatred for her because, of her talking about Israel. Everybody's got to protect Israel at all costs. So, and I guess there was a recent video interview with Tucker Carlson and a professor of chemistry at Cornell University. His name is Dave Collum. It was done in August. Collum. And I guess that was all verified there too. A lot of this stuff with, I don't know if it was the chemical or the genetic things that they were doing. I can't, like I said, I can't say the W word in conjunction with some certain words. But I tell you what, it's going to probably take till late at night till this is actually even put up. I'm going to be censored heavily. A lot of people are not going to have this video exposed to them that they can watch it either because of this that I'm talking about right now. I mean, that's how that works, as you know, with the censorship, is the hold it back. What are they? You never can think of that word. Anyway, downplay my video is what they're trying to do. Okay. And USAID heavily involved in that. So they were funding a lot of this stuff, I guess, in Ukraine as well with these laboratories. So I guess, USAID, it's not USAID. They were just using that as an agency. And Soros, he was using it. And Elon Musk said it's a criminal agency, and it certainly is. They did a lot of the nastiness in Belarus. It was done through USAID. So it's like, oh, it sounds so nice, USAID. Oh, they're giving aid. They're giving aid to disadvantaged countries and disadvantaged people. But they're the nastiest organization probably on the planet. They're the CIA. It's a CIA organization. You guys all know that. And that's their way to get funding into all sorts of any types of programs that they want. Give it even a fake name and call it Voice of America or whatever, and drum up spies and saboteurs, that set off bombs and kill people. Yeah. So this Dave Collum, I didn't even see it, this thing, but I just read about the interview. He admitted that about these tests in Ukraine were done on the Canadian or the Ukrainian population. And he was talking then about 38 laboratories. So maybe these 38 had some special work that they were doing. The 38 out of the 36 that they actually had. And maybe the 38 were operating even long, maybe even after the special military operation. Maybe even now, I don't know. But he also mentioned that USAID funded that Event 201. Remember? It was in October, just 6 weeks before Corona, but the Event 201 was to enact a situation just in case the unthinkable that would happen, that a coronavirus might break out, these people, and it broke out just 6 weeks after Event 201. And I think you can even find the things. Look up Event 201, even on YouTube, I think you can find out. Wow. So, anyway, I already said genetic stuff, but I'm not even supposed to probably. I don't know. I hope I can mention that. Yeah. But you got to hope. They haven't come up with anything, I don't think yet, with any kind of genetic weapons, and we have to hope that they don't. I tell you what, this is some nasty stuff. And I had genetics, some classes. I was finding it fascinating, and then I didn't like it after a bit. You get into like genetics 201, the second year of genetics, and you find out genetics, the vast part of genetics is a study of deformities. And I just couldn't see that. I couldn't see like people with deformities and, all these terrible things, that born with this and that. And it was depressing. And I was not then totally committed to like going into genetics and things, but I was fascinated by it and all, but I just said, oh, I don't really want a career in this. That's just too depressing to see all this stuff. And I've even seen people. I've seen one lady, she had 2 thumbs. And I was sitting there looking at this. There's a black girl in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And I was thinking, I said, they were a lot of people in the world. They were waiting for somebody to have 2 thumbs. They thought that would be the next advancement in human genetics. The next best thing is having 2 thumbs. And I was seeing this woman that had 2 thumbs. I can't remember if it was on both hands or just one. And I was sitting there thinking, damn, they really want to know you. But I didn't say anything. And I don't know. But if somebody in genetics sees this video and sees that I mentioned this, that there is somebody like that, this girl, she looked like she was maybe 30 years old. I mean, and gee, that's going to be something. They'll have a lot of people rushing down to St. Vincent and the Grenadines to try to find this woman. But anyway, and not even a rich woman. She was taking public transportation at least. So anyway, not enough of that. So, like I said, there was a country in the Middle East that was working on that. As you all know, Israel was working on that. I haven't heard anything from Israel working on these genetic things. Starts with a W, genetic, but I don't know. I just know that they were doing that recently in Ukraine, but I heard about that maybe decades ago in Israel, because they're trying to create something where, it maybe affects Arabic types of peoples, but doesn't affect the European type people that are masquerading as Semitic peoples from that region, which most of them are not. So anyway, but they wanted to get something that wouldn't affect them, but maybe would affect the others. Just like those that might affect various groups of Russians, ethnic Russians and throughout the Russian Republic things, and wouldn't affect some of the other peoples. That's a real difficult thing. I don't know how far they've gotten or whatever. And like I said, they had some experiment, 48 Ukrainian, and I'm assuming they were all men. I think they were all soldiers, and all of them but one died. And that was probably maybe the control group or maybe it was a placebo, and that's why, I don't know. So anyhow, what else? Anyway, you already know what government was funding all that in Ukraine. I was going to try to keep it a secret. Yeah. Okay, Trump has announced land strikes in Venezuela, like I said, and he said they're starting now. And he said it's not going to be just Venezuela. I don't know if he's said bad actors or maybe he said bad people. He's going to be going after bad people. And I guess if something is happening in your country and whatever, some bad people there, then automatically the leader is the bad people. I wonder if he's going to be going against himself, bombing himself for whatever bad things that are going on in the United States. I don't know. So, Trump was also, I was kind of like cringing on this one there. He was in there. He made a joke and he was laughing. He said, that nobody's fishing in the Southern Caribbean anymore. And people around him are laughing about that too. And a lot of people, they actually depend on for food and for their income for this fishing. It's important. That's all they know, and that's all they've done their entire lives, and their families all involved in fishing. Now they can't go fishing because they don't want to get bombs dropped on them. So what are they going to get into? Or maybe they're trying to get ready to get bombed. And anyway, but Donald Trump thought it was pretty funny, I guess. Yeah. Shows how much he understands, people. Sometimes, like I just said, I mentioned something that was positive about Trump getting rid of all of this crap, and even Elon Musk, and saying how this U.S. aid is actually basically an evil organization with the stuff that they were doing. And then he turns around and does this sort of thing. Yeah. Good things and a lot of bad things. Look at it, like wholeheartedly in favor of the genocide in Gaza. He wants to stop the killing in East Ukraine area there, but he doesn't mention that with all the people dying in Gaza and all that. And it's still going on, a lot of this killing in the Middle East. I think just yesterday they bombed something in Lebanon, and I guess they're getting ready for a huge, there's big evidence that they're getting for a big operation in Lebanon, or at least a big attack, either a big operation maybe lasting days in multiple places, multiple bombs all over, or is it just a big operation maybe to kill some certain person, maybe the leader of whatever, maybe the leader of Hezbollah, the new leader, maybe his daughter doesn't have a cell phone, or his son, so they, I don't know, having to think of some other way to knock him off, and wait for the next leader to come in and keep knocking them off. Maybe they're going to be trying to steal the land all the way up to the Litani River. Anyway, so tanker wars, I mentioned that, I think it was yesterday. So now I guess maybe there was some Iranian fuel in that tanker that Donald Trump seized, because it looks like Iran seized an oil tanker of their own. I guess it was carrying smuggled diesel fuel. You know, like I was telling you about, that's what's going on in the Caribbean. A lot of these people that are supposedly smuggling drugs, in truth, I'll bet very many of them, a lot of them are fishermen, and a lot of them are smuggling diesel fuel. They're not smuggling drugs. And of course, there's probably some that are smuggling. As a matter of fact, there are probably some, and I know that is the fact, that some of the fishermen also have a little bit of drugs, and they smuggle it to maybe individual people and hotels in the Caribbean, Western people that have hotels in the Caribbean, and they're maybe going to be the ones that are doing the drug dealing. I don't know, because I've kind of seen some evidence of all of that while I was living down there. So, but anyway, you got to create some story so that everybody will accept that you're killing a bunch of people, and most of them innocent probably. So, yeah, Iran seized this. There was no name given of this tanker, but it was in the Sea of Oman, and they were also going under a false flag. And I don't know if it was smuggled Iranian fuel. It was 6 million liters of diesel fuel. Okay. Anyhow, yeah, this operation in Lebanon from Israel. Apparently, Hezbollah, because, you know, Israel wiped out a lot of them anyway, but they're holding the ceasefire. They have not attacked Israelis or anything in Israel, but from the very beginning, you know, Israel calmed down a lot. They stopped a lot of the major bombing, but they've never stopped bombing. They're bombing supposedly Hezbollah, and maybe some of them are Hezbollah, I don't know, but they're always bombing something. And who knows what this operation is going to be. But they're not obeying the ceasefire, and Hezbollah is. You know, and I guess Donald Trump will interpret that as Hezbollah is not obeying the ceasefire. Anyway, that's all I have to say. It's a long video. It's nearly 1.5 hours. It's going to be forever when this to upload. We had -5 or 6, yeah, -6 it was earlier this morning. It's probably, I think it's -4 degrees around now outside. It's getting colder over here in Minsk. Anyhow, that's all I have to say. And I thank you guys for joining me, and yeah, keep your eyes on the news and don't take wooden nickels. Okay, till next time. Bye-bye.